Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing well today, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my head covering and an update on it from the last video that I've had on here on YouTube. I think it's been over a year, and so I'm going to do a little update, and I have some notes right here that I'm going to be reading off of. I'm going to have 4 different sections, topics that I'm going to be discussing about. And so we've got this so I don't ramble. Okay, so we'll get right into it. The first thing I want to mention is how I feel now compared to when I was first wearing it. And so I put that I feel more comfortable being feminine. And what I mean by that is I've been more comfortable with the idea of wearing dresses and skirts and sort of having my hair be, I guess you could say, nicer or more presentable in a way, just because I usually am putting it into a ponytail or a bun or just like some sort of like half kind of ponytail. And so I just feel that wearing my head covering over time kind of influenced the rest of what I wear with my fashion. And so I feel more like comfortable with the idea of it, because I know before, the type of person that I was before, I was very much a tomboy, and I enjoyed a lot of just kind of baggier kind of clothes, and just, you know, t-shirts and sweatpants and jeans kind of thing. I wasn't very into dresses or skirts like at all. That was something that I never wore before, and so wearing my head covering over time kind of influenced the rest of my fashion. And so the next thing that I'll be talking about is I feel more confident in my appearance, is something that I also mentioned. And so I kind of have the idea that I don't really care so much about how people are perceiving me or viewing me, because I know before I was very concerned about I guess almost making people feel weird or uncomfortable in a way. I don't know if that's the right words, but at the same time, it did feel that way. I felt a little different, I guess you could say, than other people, and so I didn't really always feel comfortable being around others in public, or even, like, I don't know, looking up and making eye contact and smiling kind of thing. I was a little uncomfortable, but over time I have gained more confidence in my appearance, and just realizing that I shouldn't care so much about what people think. I should be caring about what God thinks. So the second point that I'm going to be mentioning is that now I'm comfortable wearing different kinds of coverings or hats or anything that I would consider something on my head, because I'm not too concerned about covering all of my hair. That's not really something that I haven't put too much thought into. And so what I wrote was I am into wearing hats, just like a baseball cap kind of hat. I really enjoy them. I only have one at the moment, and it is a white one, like a plain white one. And I've noticed that I really enjoy plain colors as well. So when I go and get some more, I do want to kind of stick to a plain color theme. I also wrote down that I like to wear thicker kind of headbands, and I have a couple of them, and I enjoy wearing them more during the winter time, just because sometimes my ears get really cold, and so I like to have the headband kind of go over my ear a bit and then just a little farther back. And in the future, this is something else that I wanted to mention. I do want to try different kinds. There's this thing called a snood. I don't know if there's other terms for it, but it's essentially like all my hair would go back into a head wrap, almost as if, but it just kind of sits on your head. It's almost like it's a hat, but it like gets all of your hair from the back. I've seen like them in a more stylish kind of fashionable way, so I thought maybe I can like invest online and just see what they have. And other things would be like some scarves. I like the idea of having a scarf and kind of just like tying it up or doing something different, and different lengths of the scarves as well. I think that would be kind of cool to try out, and just different styles and colors of hats is something that I wrote too. So I like the idea of, if I'm out in doing something for summertime, then I like the idea of like put it on like a big kind of, I don't know what you call them, like sun hats, I think is that what you call them? And I don't know, just something different, because I do enjoy having a bit of fashion with what I wear, and so I've been more comfortable with the idea of not always wearing this style 24/7, and yeah, that's just kind of something that's changed over time. So for this third point that I'm going to mention, it's kind of going to be discussing more about some negative thoughts that I have and how I deal with them. And so for this part where I talk about negative thoughts, I'm going to give an example of what the negative thought is, and then I'm going to share what thought I have to combat that, to give a positive thought. And then I'm going to give a verse. I'm going to share a verse that I think is relatable to that topic. And so one of the first things I wrote is, I'm not good enough to wear this. And I think, that thought kind of comes from the idea of thinking that other people are going to judge me, because even though that's something that I don't think as much as what I used to, sometimes that thought may just kind of come back and crawl up in there. So what I say to have a positive thought afterwards is I will think instead, I wear this to be humble, not to be perfect. And it was something that back then it really did affect me. And I know that thought, thinking that it's not about perfectionism, it's not about thinking that you have to be a certain way in order to do certain things, I guess is maybe a good way to word that. And so I guess I've always have felt unqualified, I guess, if you will, I guess due to the fact of just some sinful things that I have done, and just overall people and what they desire, like what our flesh desires. Like it can make you feel less than sometimes. And so instead of thinking like that, I remind myself that I wear this to know my humbleness, right? Like I'm not doing this to say that I'm better or be perceived differently because of it. This is something that is, I guess you could say, very personal. And so a verse that I think is relatable is 2 Corinthians 5:21, and it says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And so the other negative thought would be, what if I make other people uncomfortable? And that's sort of what I was mentioning earlier. And again, it was something that was affecting me a little bit more before, but again, it does come back every once in a while, because these are the only two that I'm going to be mentioning, and these are the two that really were getting at me, because I like the idea, and this comes from, I guess, people pleasing. I like the idea of having good, kind of meaningful gestures that I can give to other people. Like, I always want to be able to be nice, and I always want to be able to make people feel good, like, be happy and stuff, that kind of thing. And it's not to say that I shouldn't be kind, or I shouldn't, have that good sense of compassion for people. But it is to say that I shouldn't care so much if whether or not what I'm wearing, in terms of what I see as good, is if it's really making people uncomfortable or not. Because if it was, me wearing immodesty type of clothing, then, that could be a different route that you could take with that, because it could be affecting other people in a negative way. But at the same time, that's a whole nother topic, and I know that's like a very personal journey for people. And so instead of thinking, well, what about if I make them uncomfortable, I could think, well, what if I inspire somebody? What if I encourage someone? What if I lead somebody down the route of questioning, and then they wind up having like a positive reaction to it, kind of thing, right? And so I know that, like how I said, it's not about making everybody happy and trying to enforce that behavior with everybody, because there's going to be that few people where you're never going to make them happy, and no matter what you do. And so you just got to kind of realize it's not about that. It's really about just speaking the truth at that point, right? Being honest with people. And so the verse that I am going to be sharing is Galatians 1:10. Galatians, I'm sorry if I said that wrong. It says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to people please? If I were still trying to people please, I would not be a servant of Christ. And so it's, literally like what I just said. I, have been in that boat before where I feel the need to people please, and it's not worth it. It can be energy draining, it's just not always the healthiest for you and your well-being. And so, having these positive thoughts to combat the negative ones, it really is helpful. And even just opening your Bible and reading just a small, basic kind of verse like that, even though it's really not, but in terms of small, that it's not long, like it's just a shorter verse, it has a huge impact on people. And especially when you are not feeling it, you don't feel good, that is something that I would highly recommend to do if you want to start getting rid of some of these negative thoughts. Okay, so 4, and the last thing that I want to talk about is I want to share some advice that I would give to others. And so one of the first things I wrote was, know for yourself why you are doing it. So if you don't know yet whether or not you want to start covering your head, I would start really questioning yourself. Why? Why are you doing it? What's the purpose of you doing it? I guess be aware that when you start, it probably will feel really different and uncomfortable. But if you feel, completely negative about it and just, there's no way I can do it, then I would take a step back. I wouldn't try to rush it, and I would do research, right? So I would look into the Bible, look at what it says in there, look at maybe other testimonies that people have online. Maybe you could even see other people who were sharing the verses, like pastors or other people who have talked about it that, you want to hear out, and just kind of get their perspective on, what certain verses mean. Like, especially with the 1 Corinthians where it talks about it. I think it's important to, understand what you think that means with your own kind of awareness. But then also, I would say, if it's still really confusing, I would say, maybe even do a deep dive with the words and see what the Hebrew meaning of those words are. Like, just kind of trace stuff back if you really have to. There are books, there are other types of resources where it will show you stuff like that, so maybe you wouldn't have to go deep diving into it if you, don't have the time, or you just don't know where to start. But I would just suggest, do your research, know why you're doing it, and just know that in the beginning when you start, or if you do, that it will be different, okay? And just because it's different doesn't really mean that it's bad. It doesn't really even mean that it's really good either, but just know that that feeling is normal, I guess is what I would say. And another advice that I would have, and maybe this one's more for a visual perspective, kind of influence, I would say look at photos or paintings of women covering their heads, not only to see how they practice it, but to kind of get an influence of seeing that a lot of women back in the day were covering their heads. That was just a very normal way of living at one point for all women, like all over the world, all different cultures. So if it's something, that where if you see other kind of references, it could help kind of make that connection with you or for you, then that would be really interesting too. What I like to do is I've been into the antique store, different ones, like a couple of times, and every time that I go in there and I see these paintings or maybe even like kind of figurine, statue, kind of miniature things where it's of a woman with her head covered, I always take a photo of it because I think it's the most interesting thing ever that, we're walking like in an antique store, right? But like through history, and you can just see the way how life was at one point, and everybody kind of had a little bit of their own way of doing it at one time, where it was meant for women who were married, and then it was meant for people who were just overall believers, and so they had their children wearing it too and stuff, so it varied with history too. And so that's why I think, if you were to practice it today, I really think that you can kind of be a little bit easy on yourself and not take it so harshly, especially because a lot of women don't do it at all today. You could say that, depending on where you live, I guess is what I'll say. But I guess over here in the US, we don't usually see stuff like this. I guess you could say there is a community that is growing where people, maybe they're not Mennonite or Amish and they are doing it. But overall, like when, you go out in public and you see people, you don't overall always see it, but I will admit and agree that it depends on where you live. Because if you live in certain areas of, Pennsylvania or something like that, you're going to see a lot of Mennonite and Amish and stuff out there. But I know that was kind of my influence in a way too. That was where my curiosity kind of started. That's what I was mentioning in the other video that I had from a year ago. And so that is everything that I have to share. And I hope that this was inspirational. I hope that this was maybe something that could have answered some questions that maybe not only were you maybe curious from the first video, but then maybe over time you're probably thinking, well, I wonder what it's like now, or if anything has changed. In terms of, I will say this, in terms of my beliefs, and why I do what I do, everything is the same. I haven't really changed the idea of why I do it. There's really not that much of a difference, just because the only thing I would say is I will say this, my perspective of Jesus Christ has tremendously changed. And that is something that I'm not going to mention too much in this video, but if that is something that you are curious about, or maybe you want to know what I mean by that, or whatever, then I guess let me know in the comments, because I don't really know if I really want to talk about it, just because it is, I find it very personal with my connection with him. And so, but if people are curious, then maybe I will look into it. But I will just say this, my relationship with him has changed dramatically in the most amazing way ever. And when I was first covering my head, I was kind of confused about I guess you could say the reasoning of why Jesus had to do what he had to do, and just why he was here, and why everything went down the way that it did. I was a little not fully aware. And then, I've been reading the Bible, as much as I can, and I've just been reading through cover to cover. I've been, doing my best to try to get very into it so that I can understand everything that I really feel that is necessary for me to understand. And reading it's just the best way to understand it. Like, I already love reading as it is, and so reading, the Bible is just like, I really appreciate it. I really do enjoy it. I just may not always have the time. I will admit I may not read it every single day. That was something that I was doing before, but then it just sort of, my time kind of got limited. You know, things were happening, life was happening, so I kind of had to like step back a little. But my relationship with him has really changed. Something had happened, and I started viewing people differently. I started seeing things around me differently, and it's just been great. It's been a very positive thing for me, and I am just super grateful. And I feel like I can't ask for more. I'm just so happy. But yes, that is all that I have for this video. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that it is something that is encouraging and has answered maybe some questions that you've had or anything else. And so I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great one, and bye-bye.